After World War I, Germany was very poor and in lots of debt. A terrible man named Adolf Hitler convinced the German people and much of the world that Jews were to blame. The Holocaust was a terrible time in history where the Nazis began to terrorize and murder Jews and other undesirables. The Holocaust was one of the worst and fastest genocides in human history, and like other genocides, it should be remembered. I was recently speaking with an anonymous person, and I told them I was studying the Holocaust, and they asked me what it was. This should not be. The only way to never repeat terrible historic events is to study them and pass them down to younger generations. Through education, we can learn very crucial lessons, such as standing up and speaking out if you see discrimination, and to never allow hate against racial, ethnic, or religious minorities. Before I get started, I'd like to tell you the point of this presentation. History has been hard on the Jewish people. We have been persecuted and targeted for thousands of years, and that continues even today. This presentation will talk about what led up to the Holocaust itself, and the worldwide Jew hatred that persists right now, especially in the tiny Jewish homeland of Israel. Recently, there has been much news about hatred towards Asians, police targeting African Americans, and bias towards other ethnic groups. This awareness is crucial so we stop that hate in its tracks. But you may notice that there are very few news stories about the single most targeted ethnically religious groups in the world, Jewish people. The most recent FBI statistics show that of the 1,500 or so anti-religion hate crimes in America, almost 1,000 of them are against Jewish people. So while Jews only make up 2% of America's population, they are the victim of almost 70% of all ethnic religious hate crimes. I want people to know about this, and the best place to start is with youth. My hope today is that you understand more about anti-Semitism by the end of my presentation. Thank you all for watching and listening. Enjoy. As probably a lot of you know, the Jews were killed and treated terribly during the Holocaust. But it wasn't just Jews and other undesirables that got mistreated and killed. Anybody who even remotely helped the Jews were killed as well. If anybody has seen the movie Jojo Rabbit, you will know that anybody who helped the Jews were killed by being hanged in the streets for everybody to see and laugh at. They don't care who you are, what you do, if you have a family or not. All they know is that you helped the Jews and that you needed to be gone. Another reference from Jojo Rabbit is that Jews were said to read minds, have devil's horns and wings, and so on. Nazis laughed at the sight of drawings of this and congratulated the Jewish girl who was disguised as a Nazi supporter because she drew it. Now, we don't know if this really happened, but it's just a reference of an example of the Holocaust. One more piece from Jojo Rabbit is that Jojo, the little boy, idolized Hitler and the Nazis, and by 10 years old, he was in Nazi training. His imaginary friend was Hitler, and he wanted to be just like him, have the same thoughts and actions as him, fight the same fight as him, and I know for a fact that this happened. Every kid was raised on the dictation of Hitler, and thought he was the smartest, bravest man alive. He thought of him as a genius, along with every other kid. He was so wrapped up in being right, he didn't realize what was actually happening in the world around him.
One of the horrors of the Holocaust were the inhuman experiments done on twins. It shows the true cruelty of what the Nazis were capable of. The person in charge of these cruel experiments was led by Joseph Mengele, who was also nicknamed the Angel of Death. Many of the twins he did experiments on were children and never saw their mother again. The experiment took place in the biggest death camp, Auschwitz, where 3,000 twins were forced into becoming medical experiment subjects. The experiments exposed the twins to disease, disfigurement, and torture, and this was all under the cover of research. A twin that went through these horrible experiments said that she and her sister had to sit naked for hours, repeatedly having her body measured and compared to her sister's. They also said that they withstood injections of unknown substances that caused severe reactions. Mengele also impregnated one gypsy twin with the sperm of another twin, and she got pampered through pregnancy, and Mengele attended the birth himself. Once he realized that it wasn't the twin he wanted, He ripped the baby from the mother's womb and threw the baby in the oven. This once again shows us just how evil the Nazis were.
The first 3 death camps opened in 1940, all of which were shut down in 1945 by the Soviet Army. Auschwitz was the largest and deadliest of the 6 extermination camps. It operated in German-occupied Poland and was open from 1940 until its liberation on January 27, 1945. About 1.3 million people were sent to Auschwitz. Nearly 1.1 million people were Jews, and 960,000 of which died in Auschwitz. The other 200,000 were mainly non-Jewish Poles, the mentally challenged, Roma people or gypsies, homosexuals, and Soviet prisoners of war. 85% of people sent to Auschwitz were murdered at the camp, and the 7,000 people liberated were very ill and close to death. That 7,000 who were liberated are nowhere near the 1.3 million original people sent to Auschwitz. Weeks before the Soviet forces approached the camp system, nearly 60,000 had been evacuated and forced to march west towards Wochitla, away from the complex on what is known today as death marches. More than 15,000 people died on this march because of exposure, starvation, cold weather, or those who couldn't keep up were shot by the SS guards. This is yet another example of the inhuman ways that the Nazis treated Jews and other undesirables. The death camp took up 500 acres, and a lot of the site was cleared up by forced labor. Today, 155 buildings and 300 ruins remain on the site. More prisoners came from Hungary than any other country. The second largest groups are 300,000 from Poland and 69,000 from France. There are 232,000 children that were sent to Auschwitz. And on October 10, 1944, 800 children were gassed to death. The exact number of children killed in Auschwitz still remains unknown. There are 929 prisoners who tried to escape, but only 196 were successful and lived to see the end of the war. Many of those who escaped were helped by local Polish citizens who hated the SS in the camp. In July 1940, in a letter to the SS commander on the Warklaw Police, the Auschwitz commander observed that the local population was ready to do anything against the hated camp SS garrison. Every prisoner who manages to escape can count on all possible help as soon as he reaches the first Polish homestead. There were 1,200 held in each barrack when they were only designed for 700. A barrack is sleeping quarters for Jewish people who were captured in Auschwitz and other undesirables. There were about 8,400 staff members during its 5-year tenure. There were about 200 female guards, and many of the staff were Catholic or Lutheran. 1,209 were SS men, and 5.5% had education beyond secondary school. 673 were charged of crimes. Some of them were sentenced to death, while the others spent years in prison, but still, many were acquitted with their crimes. Other former SS guards, known to have worked in the camps, were called by court as witnesses but did not face trials themselves. Jews and other undesirables, such as homosexuals, black people, and other people in the LGBTQ+ community, were brutally killed in death camps, on the street hangings, etc. Some of them were just found in the streets and murdered. Over 6 million Jewish people died, and the Nazis weren't afraid to kill children too. They killed millions of Jewish children because of biological reasons. In Israel, there is a Holocaust museum, and one of the parts of the museum has an extremely long hallway with pictures of the children killed in the Holocaust. In the hallway, there is a voice that says every name of every kid killed. If you were to stay there and listen to every name, it would take you 1 year to hear all of them. Along with Jews and LGBTQ+, the Nazis also killed gypsies, disabled people, and enslaved people because the Nazis thought of them as threats and wanted them gone. We all hope the Holocaust doesn't repeat itself, but there are frightening signs that it one day might. Israel's neighbors have been attacking, invading, bombing, and firing rockets at mostly civilians since November 1948. This is when the UN passed Resolution 181, which declared 2 legal nations in the land known as Palestine, formerly known as Israel-Judea. Israel's number one priority is protecting its citizens, and after years of terror groups murdering innocent Jewish civilians, including 4 bloody wars, Israel developed some amazing technology called the Iron Dome. Iron Dome tracks rockets and missiles being fired at civilians, then blows it up before it can hurt anybody. Last month, over 4,000 missiles were fired, and most were intercepted, saving hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. Unfortunately, a few missiles got through, and innocent civilians did die. Like every other nation on Earth, Israel has the right to defend itself when attacked. Israel's number one enemy is a terrorist group called Hamas. Hamas has a charter, which is like our constitution, and in the charter it states that Israel must be annihilated. When Hamas attacks Israeli civilians, they fire missiles from schools, hospitals, and near homes of innocent Gaza civilians. Israel values the lives of civilians so much that even when they use their advanced weapons to stop the missile attacks, they go to lengths never done before in all of history by warning civilians with phone calls to give them time to leave the area. They even send a special little explosive to land on top of the building called a roof knock. The roof knock is designed to let people know that Hamas is using them as human shields, and they must leave the building before the Israeli military destroys the missile launchers that are in the building. The biggest threat Israel faces today is nuclear attack. Some of Israel's neighbors are very bad and have vowed to kill everybody in Israel. Iran has been trying to develop a nuclear bomb for many years now, and if they ever get one, they will probably use it to destroy Israel, and that would be a second Holocaust. The world must do everything in its power to stop them from ever getting a nuclear weapon. But hatred to the Jews from the Arabs have been going on for so long, and the Holocaust might repeat itself. At the end of our presentation, you will be sent a link where you can buy things to help Israel against Hamas and other terrorist groups and support them, so they can rise up again and come out strong. Although Israel has an amazing military, one of the best in the world, we don't know what will happen, and lives are being taken. If you can show just a little bit of support for Israel, that will be all they need for their strength. In the link, you can buy different things to support Israel, etc.
The Holocaust was, as you can see, an awful period of time that had no right to happen. Every year at every synagogue, they honor the people of the Holocaust to help people remember what happened. Although the Holocaust was a bad time, we learned crucial lessons such as standing up and speaking out if you are being mistreated and discriminated against, and to never let it happen, and to learn about our world's history. These lessons can be used all throughout life. Nobody ever wants the Holocaust to happen again, so we need to make an impact that people who this might happen to again are safe and protected, and that we can fight it out and win once and for all. Once again, we will be sending a link where you can help Israel win this war happening right now by buying products from Israel, charity, and donations. Thank you for watching and listening to our project, and hope you took something very important out of it. Thank you!